Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, and he was famous for his theory of Natism and defending Cartesian dualism. As far as the existence of God is concerned, he revived the ontological argument for the existence of God, which had kind of died away after the five ways of Thomas Aquinas. There are many layers to Descartes' argument for the existence of God, and the first one is fairly simple. He says, whatever I clearly and distinctly perceive to be contained in the idea of something is true of that thing. I clearly and distinctly perceive that necessary existence is contained in the idea of God. Therefore, God exists. Moreover, Descartes says that necessary being is a perfection in and of itself. He says, when we attend to immense power of this being, we shall be unable to think of its existence as possible without also recognizing that it can exist by its own power. And we shall infer from this that this being does really exist and has existed from eternity, since it is quite evident by the natural light that what can exist by its own power always exists. So we shall come to understand that necessary existence is contained in the idea of a supremely perfect being. This is the second version of his argument. He says, his argument is essentially this: I have an idea of a supremely perfect being, that is, a being having all perfections. Necessary existence is a perfection, therefore, a supremely perfect being exists. The other, slightly more complicated argument of Descartes for the existence of God is it concerns reality. Reality as in how perfect something is. Descartes says there are two types of reality. The first is formal reality, and the second is objective reality. Formal reality is the kind of reality things have in this world, and objective reality is the reality of the things they present. And different things, according to Descartes, have different amounts of reality. There are three types of things: infinite substances, finite substances, and modes, which are modifications of body and mind like color, shape, size, etc. Infinite substances have the most reality, for example, God. Finite substances have lesser reality. And modes, which are modifications of body and mind, have the least amount of reality. An idea can have formal reality, being a mode of thought itself, and it can also have objective reality, representing something outside of itself. All ideas are mere modes of thought, and in that sense they are all equal. They all have the same amount of formal reality. However, what they represent differs greatly, and so their objective reality also differs greatly. Thus, the idea of God has more objective reality than the idea of a tree, which has in turn more objective reality than the idea of the color red. No effect can have a greater amount of reality than its cause, according to Descartes. A stone can be made by chipping off a large piece of rock, since the larger rock has more reality, but a stone cannot be made out of a color, since a stone has more reality than a color. Moreover, something with a certain degree of objective reality must ultimately be caused by something with that degree of formal reality. For example, a tree has at least the same degree of formal reality as the idea of a tree has objective reality. If we trace the causal chain far back enough, we will find a cause with as much formal reality as the idea has objective reality. If Descartes can locate an idea that has more objective reality than he has formal reality, he can conclude that there must exist something outside of himself which had to create the idea. And since he has the formal reality of a finite substance, the only thing that has more reality is infinite substance, that is God. Since the idea of God cannot have originated in himself, he concludes that God must be the cause of this idea and must therefore necessarily exist. This argument is similar to Aristotle's cosmological argument. Descartes talks about the causal chain of ideas, whereas Aristotle talks about the causal chain of material bodies. According to Descartes, there are three types of ideas: innate, adventitious, and fictional. Innate ideas are the ideas that you're born with. Adventitious ideas come from the outside, and fictional ideas are produced internally. Having concluded that God must necessarily exist, he asks how he received the idea of God. The idea cannot be adventitious, coming from without, nor can it be invented by him. Thus, the idea must be innate, and he must have been created by God with this idea already in him. This theory of innatism is opposed to John Locke's theory of tabula rasa that John Locke presented in his book An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. We'll make a separate video about the theory of innatism. So yeah, this was more or less the argument of Descartes for the existence of God.